All right, well, bookmark this one or learn it well because we're going to be doing lots of factoring this year. So here's our first example, just simple old greatest common factor. Call it the GCF, and the greatest, meaning it's the largest thing, it's a factor, so it divides out of each term, and common means it divides out of every term. So the greatest common factor here would be 13x because both of these are divisible by 13 evenly. And an x can divide evenly out of both of those without giving you any variables in the denominator. So we do that, and then what you're left with goes in the parentheses. Now, the way I think about it is, all right, my greatest common factor is 13x, so I think of it as undistribution. So what would I distribute 13x to get a 13x squared? I would distribute that to x. What would I distribute it to get a negative 39x? It's a negative sign here, so we got to make sure I have the negative. I distribute that to a negative 3. Negative 3 times 13x will give me negative 39x. And then it's a good idea to just quickly in your head double check. So you just sort of redistribute it back out. If you factor something, then you multiply it back together, you should get what you started with every time. So that one is correct. All right, so when we say factor completely, you're first going to look for a GCF, which there is no common factor here, so we're all set. But always check for this first thing. Now we're going to split the middle term. We're going to split the middle term into something equivalent. So I got to find two terms that, take the two terms, what multiplies to AC, so their coefficients A, B, and C, or three terms A, B, and C of a quadratic. The A and C, the first and last term multiplied, is 15r squared, and then the middle term is 16r, that's our B. Now I want to find two terms that will multiply to give me this and add to give me this. All right, so what are two factors? There's all the factors of 15r squared. 13r times 5r or 1r times 15r. Well, 13r plus 5r does not equal 16r, so that's not it. It's 1 and 15. So I split the middle term over here. Now 1r plus 15r is equal to 16r, right? That should be equivalent. I'm going to write an equivalent expression, right? So this is equivalent to this step up here, but it has two terms instead of one in the middle there. But it would simplify to the same thing. And now I factor by grouping. So I group the two higher degree terms and factor out an r. Group the lower degree terms. Its GCF is 3. Now, if you've done it right, both of the parentheses will have the same expression. And they do. So that's my first factor. Or it doesn't matter which one's first. So r plus 3 is my first factor. And the second one is 5r plus 1. That is factored completely. That's done. Now, if I distributed those back together, I would get what I started with. But factoring gives us this for an answer. All right, last example here. Sorry for the longish video. Follow our steps here. So what's the GCF? A 5r factors out of everything. It leaves me with that. So then I'm going to split the middle term. Now, as I do this, the 5r is going to kind of just tag along. But let's split the middle term first. All right, what goes into 42? I'm going to write all the factors. If you find the two that work quicker, just use them. But just for sake of example here, these are all the things that would multiply to give me 42. Oh, that should be a 42. Sorry about that. All right, they should all be negative because they had to multiply to a positive but add up to a negative, so they actually all have to be negative. And I see which ones add up. It's negative 6r and negative 7r. So I split that middle term. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy down these parentheses several times so the tags along. Factor, I'm only really worried about what's inside there. So r factors out of both of those. A negative 7 factors out of both of those. Notice I had to factor out a negative 7 because if I factored out a positive 7, then this would have to still be negative, and that would have to be positive for it to distribute correctly. So in order to factor it correctly, I got to factor a negative out. There's my two factors, so I didn't need that third one. There you go. There's the answer. That is factoring in a nutshell, the basic ones.